Hey everybody, welcome to Free Will, Science, and Religion. I'm here with Chandler Klebs and Jamie Soden. My name is George Ortega, and today we've got two kind of themes. One theme is like how free will belief hurts us. It hurts us on a personal level, it hurts us societally, it hurts us as a world. And our second theme is how our religions, that in many cases haven't evolved or changed their views for several thousand years, are the main source of this unnecessary suffering caused by this belief in free will. And again, we're not going to blame religion, we're not going to blame churches and synagogues and mosques or the rabbis and ministers and allahs, whatever. We're not going to blame them, but we need to identify them as the cause of this kind of curse of humanity, this horrible delusion that humanity's under that causes so much pain. Okay, guys, who wants to start us in terms of like why free will belief is so harmful to us as people, individually and as a society?
Well, I think I can do that. Yeah. See, the problem is people are they blame others and themselves for doing things that they couldn't really have done otherwise. Because to do otherwise, they would have had to have been a different person, had different desires, emotions, genetics, all that stuff. and and it's so weird because it leads to this anger and this hatred, and it's really strange because I used to have that problem. I used to genuinely just hate people, like, because they do evil things, and I didn't get it. But a lot of that might be the fact that I was raised in the religion of Christianity, and I was taught about that people deserve to be punished for their sin and all this stuff, and everything was a sin. Just about every possible thing someone could do was a sin. But I don't, and I guess, yeah, I just noticed that it never actually helped anything. Like, you blame a person, like, well, this person could have done otherwise, and they chose to do this bad thing of their free will. But you know what? It doesn't even help. Even if it was true, which it's not, it doesn't actually help. All it does is, like, you get angry at that person for choosing to do something, and you don't know that there are causes that led them to do it.
Right? Let's explore this in more detail. Jamie, let's say like a friend of yours. I mean, let's get. All right, we can use something that's maybe real life. In other words, like sometimes to explain things like this, we might use some science fiction, like a scientist puts an electrode in a person's brain and controls their brain. But let's get a bit more realistic. Let's say like one of your friends, Jamie,
Mm,
who's ordinarily a nice guy, very polite, whatever,
yeah.
law abiding, he's in a bar with you or in a restaurant, and you see somebody put something in his drink, somebody spike his drink with some kind of like an agent, a chemical, that
Yeah.
that that will cause him and you don't know what it was, you just see it, and unfortunately he drinks it before you can do anything about it. And then, like, when you're leaving the restaurant, he goes out and he starts committing crimes. He starts destroying property, starts, like, yelling, let's say, at people, whatever. How are you going to view him? How are you going to view that situation? Are you going to feel angry at him at all?
Um. Well, if I knew that the chemical caused him to do that kind of stuff, then I wouldn't be angry at him, but I'll be angry about what he's done though. So
Certainly, and like, not only would you not be angry with him, would you kind of like feel a bit compassionate for him, because like he's going
mm,
to probably get in trouble with the law, right?
of course, yeah. But I'll also be angry with the person who's spiked his drink because that's that would have been the reason why he had that violent outburst to begin with.
Jamie, okay, so that brings us directly into what we're talking about with religion and the church. So in other words, like, as Chandler was somewhat explaining, um, to the extent that we human beings don't have a free will, that we understand that, like in that case, that person whose drink was spiked and went out and did, it wasn't up to him because, like, there's nothing he could have done about it. To the extent we understand that, if we're religious people, like 80-90% of us are here in the United States, a bit less so in England, um, then we're left with the unescapable, well, maybe not completely unescapable, but like, we're left somewhat concluding that if it's not our fault when we do things wrong, when we like do crimes and do horrible things, then it has to be God's fault. Because if God is all powerful, and so that I think is a problem. That's one reason I think why the church, why religions find it so difficult to accept this truth, this fundamental truth, that free will is an illusion.
Well, yeah, I get what you're saying, George, because as many, like, if you've ever listened to a lot of, atheists out there who left, Christianity, you'll find that that's their attitude. Like, well, if this God did exist, it would be God's fault because God could have created a world without pain, that sort of thing. And it's kind of a strange thing because here's what's kind of interesting is they basically, yeah, they have to, yeah, there's that belief, well, God could have done otherwise. So in a way they're attributing a free will belief to God. And you've even talked about how would that work? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's and the concept of like all powerful implies that this God, which is almost always in the context of Christianity, like it's always viewed as like a man in the sky, a conscious thing like that. And it's weird because people then they get angry at God, which is interesting because while it's better than being angry at the human beings around you, I suppose. But a lot of people who are in that, who grew up in that, and they start getting angry at God because of bad things that happen in the world, well, then they're blaming God. So in a way, it takes them away from the blaming of other humans, but it causes another problem. It causes a problem where basically they have this enemy out there in the sky somewhere. And that's not a very healthy thing either. But that's what happens to a lot of them.
All right, Chandler, that's a great point. So let's explore that. So Jamie, um, let's say, well, because people either blame God, or if a person is an atheist, they would blame the universe. Because something must cause us to do what we do that's not right. So Jamie, so like with this person, so you're saying that yes, you wouldn't be angry at the person because you knew that it wasn't his fault, but you would still be angry that it happened, right?
I'd still be angry it happened, yeah, and then to some degree, I'll be angry at the person who spiked the drink because it's something I just didn't, you wouldn't want to happen. You wouldn't want to see your friend go around doing these things, or because of some drug or whatever that they've taken.
Right. So now, Jamie, with this example, let's use this person who spiked the drink. I should probably come up with a different analogy. In other words, like instead of a person spiking a drink, let's say there's this chemical that was like, I know this is like a bit science fiction-y, but there's this chemical on the ceiling, whatever, that just drops into the drink, and you see it drop. You have no idea what it is, but you see it. And then so like basically what I'm saying is like, so that whether it's the person that spiked the drink or it's some kind of like a natural phenomenon, ultimately you would be blaming God or the universe. So my question is, how does that feel to transfer the blame from this person to God or the universe?
Well, it does seem logical, doesn't it? I mean, we don't control the laws of physics, do we? So.
But how does it feel emotionally? And I mean, is it like, because like in my experience, sometimes, yes, I get angry at God for causing us to abuse animals, for causing us to hurt each other. I get angry with God for causing hurricanes and all these things that hurt us. But is it sometimes less easy to be angry with God than to be angry with human beings?
Well, I don't believe in God, so I would just say it's the universe causing these things to happen. But still, there is emotional baggage that comes with, like, form of beliefs, man.
All right, actually, so let's explore this. So, like, all right, so you're right. From an atheist standpoint, it's not quote unquote God's fault, but it's still. I mean, do you then blame the universe, or does your lack of belief in God lead you to a conclusion that you really can't blame anything?
Well, well, you could blame laws. You could blame, like, the universe, and still, not believe in the idea of free will.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, so like,
I
go ahead,
yeah,
Chandler.
yeah, I think I can answer your question, George. Basically, you are stuck as an atheist. You are stuck with this realization. Wait, you don't really have anything to blame. You know what I'm saying? At the very best you can do is you can blame the infinite causal regress, but that doesn't do anything. It's sort of like everything's to blame, but nothing's to blame all at the same time. It's kind of a paradox.
Yeah, and Chandler, it's interesting. You kind of like phrased it as like an atheist is quote unquote stuck with this, but I think isn't it kind of like a blessing? Explain it.
Yeah, I think I can explain it because this is how I experience it. It is like, well, what it comes down to is no is that like I think of the causal chain and how everything has a cause, and I think, well, wait a minute. In order to, like, you might blame a person for doing what they did, but at some point you realize, well, that person's not even responsible for their existence because that happened because their parents had sex. And since you can't blame anyone for the parents having sex, which caused their conception, and does it make sense to blame a sperm and an egg for uniting? I mean, so what happens is it turns into some kind of a weird philosophical, sexy lack of blame.
Exactly. That's great. All right. So like now let's return to the theistic perspective again, because like 80-90% of Americans are theists, and so like what we want to try to do now is absolve God. In other words, like, understanding that we don't have a free will absolves human beings of everything. We can't blame ourselves rationally for anything we do wrong. It's not our fault in any fundamental way. But again, we're left with the possibility of blaming God. Jamie, can you explain how there's a way of seeing reality that we can even absolve God?
Um, well, that's going to be difficult, because you have to have, like, some standard to prevent, well, at least try to prevent certain things from happening. I mean, we obviously don't want people going around killing each other. So we do things to prevent that. We put these people in, prison.
Right. And again, I'm not referring to like certainly we're going to have to address when people do wrong. And that's kind of like an issue, apart from blame. It's more like an issue of identifying the proximate causes of whatever happens. But like Chandler, can you come up with some kind of like a logical, explanation that actually absolves God also?
Well, it's kind of an interesting thought experiment to try this because I don't believe in God. So it's kind of like, but I used to, and it's kind of complicated because you you kind of have to, yeah, you have to believe that God is a conscious entity that was capable of making multiple decisions and specifically chose, um, somehow, causally or freely or whatever to make the universe as it is or whatever. So it's kind of a hard thing. I'm not even sure if I can, like, psychologically do that.
No, actually, that's a good point, because it's kind of like difficult to attribute free will to God, because God would have to have done what God did for certain reasons. Let me present it in a certain way, that isn't. I don't think it's completely satisfactory, but I think it's somewhat satisfactory. Basically, the way we absolve human beings of fundamental responsibility is by recognizing the principle and law of cause and effect. That because the causal regression behind everything we do, think, feel, whatever, goes back to before we were born, then clearly that absolves us. Now let's apply this causality to God. Um, so in order to blame God for anything that we beings do that is wrong, we have to we have to identify a specific point in time where God decided to make us do that. Now here's the problem. The first cause of our doing that. The problem with that is that, like, our understanding of God, and I think our logical understanding of time, is that they are seemingly eternal. That even though our known universe goes back, 13.8 billion years to the Big Bang, our logic tells us, well, there seems to have needed to be something before that. And with God, like, again, the causality of God goes back eternally. And so one way, again, it's not completely satisfactory, but like it does make sense to a certain extent, is like to absolve God, you realize that you can never reach that point where God decided to make us do something wrong, because there would have had to have been a cause for him to decide that, and a cause for that, and a cause for that. So you have this endless causal regression that where they're just never we never arrive at a point where anything's actually ever decided. Again, it's a bit surreal, but it does absolve God.
And it's interesting because, and here's the thing: when you're talking to the average American Christian, as I've talked to many online, they say, well, God's the first cause, nothing came before God, so that means you have to blame nothing because nothing caused God to do what he did. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's weird. I've never quite gotten that, and because I think that there's an infinite causal regress. I mean, it's the only thing that makes sense to me.
That's a
But
good
yeah,
point.
yeah, but I mean, they say there can't be an infinite causal regress, and I'm like, why?
I hear it. Jamie, you wanted to say something?
No, I just sat here listening to you two talking about this
Okay.
absolving God and all this stuff, and
Yeah, and when we say, like, again, like, God and the universe, like, in other words, we can apply this to the universe also. In other words, like, for atheists who don't believe in God, an atheist might still be angry at the universe for making us do things that cause us harm, right? So we can apply the same reasoning to the universe. The universe goes back endlessly, so we can never arrive at a point where the universe actually made any kind of decision, because there must have been time before that. Okay,
Yeah.
and Chandler, now you just, all right. As you were talking, it also occurred to me that there's another way that we can perhaps not completely, quote unquote, absolve God, but that we can, like, understand that God doesn't have a free will in the present. In other words, like, what I'm saying is, like, one of the attributes of, and again, what we're trying to do now is establish a rationale to help theists be able to accept the reality that free will is an illusion in a way that absolves God, in a way that doesn't pit them against, God that they very much need to believe in. So the idea is that, like, okay, one of the attributes of God that is, I think, universally held is that God is all-knowing. And it makes sense. If God created the universe, if God is the universe, then if God controls the universe, it makes sense that God would have to know the universe. God would have to know everything, that can be known. Now, here's the thing. So, Chandler, here's the thing, though. So let's go back 15 billion years or 14 billion years, right? 14 billion years ago, not only did God know what we human beings would be doing today, God also knew back then what God would be doing today. So in a sense, the same. So in other words, like, God's omniscience, the same omniscience that kind of prevents human beings from having a free will. Because again, if God knew 14 billion years ago what we are going to do today, and if God is also infallible, that's another one of God's attributes, then there's absolutely no way we could have done otherwise. That also applies to God. If God knew 14 billion years ago what God would be doing today, then essentially we're left with a God that today that has no free will either.
Yeah. And that's an interesting thing because, yeah, it's the idea, the whole omniscience thing, tied in with that is the belief that the future is set, that the future is already written, it's already predetermined. That's what is required to believe in omniscience. And people don't understand the logical implications of that and just exactly what that means.
Exactly. Okay, so Jamie, let's explore some other kinds of considerations that we need to think about, that we need to talk about to help theists overcome this belief in free will. Can you think of other reasons why Christians and Jews are unable to let go of their beliefs?
Because they're, well, one of the reasons could be peer pressure, couldn't it? Because they could be surrounded by other religious people who dogmatically hold on to old belief systems, and they just don't want to. They just can't let go of it because it just they can't wrap their minds around the fact that there's no evidence for God, and there's no evidence for free will, and it's just it's too much of emotional baggage for them, isn't it? So.
Jamie, that's an excellent point. I think like what happens in today's institutions, whether they be government institutions or businesses or religious institutions, is that like the people who get elected to the top office, whether it's presidents of companies or like the Pope and all, a lot of times they don't get elected because they're all that sharp, they're all that bright and all. A lot of times they get elected because they have a very, very sharp emotional intelligence, social intelligence. They know how to get along with people. They know how to be liked by people. And so the problem there is, yeah, as you're saying, so like, you might have people in religions that understand that free will is an illusion, but as long as the Pope or as long as the bishops and all, who may not be as bright as them, don't get it, yeah, I think they're afraid of like, of opposing authority in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think another major influence or reason why people believe in free will, contrary to all evidence, has to do with the religious belief in hell. Chandler, do you want to explain how like the belief in hell both creates the belief in free will and prevents people from overcoming it?
Oh, yes, I know how to explain this one. See, the problem with the whole hell thing, the heaven and hell thing, the belief that you get an afterlife based on your actions, well, the thing is, it implies that you are responsible and that you somehow deserve to be rewarded or punished. And there's two layers to the whole hell problem. First of all, how could anyone do something so bad as to deserve eternal punishment anyway? But there's also the understanding that since you didn't create yourself, your will is not your own making, you can't deserve anything logically. And this is a problem for religion because they require people being morally fundamentally responsible for everything. That's what they require, or the whole system falls apart.
Okay, and another part of this is like, so like when you have, let's say, Christian parents and they have a child who's maybe 4 or 5 or 6, and this child really hasn't developed their intellectual capacities yet. They're not fully mature enough to be able to reason well. But the parents might tell this child, listen, if you don't believe in God or if you don't believe what the church says, then yeah, after you die, you might go to a place, called hell where you'll suffer eternally. Now, here's the thing: when a child might hear this at 4 or 5, and then forget it, through their childhood and adolescence and into adulthood, But then what happens when it comes to like hearing these explanations of why free will is an illusion? These adults, in the back of their mind, deep in their unconscious, might have those memories, that memory of that threat that, that might have really scared them as a 4, 5, 6 year old. And so like as an adult, they're unconsciously remembering that. And that may be one of the most, salient reasons why people, adults, PhDs, academics who should be understanding this are not able to.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why it's considered child abuse to teach kids of those ages like 4 or 5 about religion, because you can't. I mean, telling them that they must believe in God or they'll suffer for eternity, right? It's just abuse, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. You want to go into that in more detail, or?
Yeah, because they will carry this haunting memory and belief that if they don't follow like whatever's in the Bible, then they'll be scared that they'll suffer if they discontinue believing God, because they'll be considered blasphemers or whatever.
Yeah, and I think what psychologists have discovered is that like a lot of times this emotional kind of abuse can be much worse than physical abuse. In other words, like if a 4-year-old or 5-year-old gets smacked for doing something wrong, it hurts and they feel bad and all, but they get over it. But if this 4 or 5-year-old is told, listen, like unless you believe what we tell you, you're going to hell. And let's say this kid is really smart. Let's say this 5-year-old, comes to the realization that like that, well, like that for God to condemn somebody to hell would be completely evil, completely wrong. Then this little kid, is going to like for the rest of his life live in fear that he's like opposing this major religious belief. And
or proposing some major authority, if not like by the priests, then by like the mythical god that they're fearing. Yeah.
Okay. All right, guys, we've got about 3 minutes left. Chandler, can you think of other messages that we can deliver to religious people to help them, overcome their need to believe in free will and understand, that we actually nothing is up to us?
Well, one thing I want us to clarify is that even though I agree with Jamie and many atheists that, it is child abuse to teach kids this stuff, to the parents who are doing this in their minds and the religious leaders and stuff, they think that they're doing the right thing. Like, I get that. They think that they're doing the right thing by teaching this because they believe it's true. And so that's part of the problem. And so
Yeah, because they believe they are morally justified. They believe that they're saving the souls of these children by, telling them that, this is what you should believe.
Yeah, and so
Chandler,
yeah,
go ahead.
yeah. I just wanted to clarify that, because even though, yeah, I agree with Tyler Abuse, I understand that people aren't intentionally trying to abuse the children. They really think they're doing the right thing, and that's something I've had to learn.
Chandler, that's an excellent point. And again, I think we can even extend that to the church and religions teaching the belief in hell. I think like we have to remember that before societies, before there were like criminal justice systems and police and courts and trials and all that, they had to figure out some kind of way to maintain social order. So somebody like back then said, well, if we really, really scare people with this kind of like story that they might have believed themselves, that it would work. And I think for a lot of people it does work. I think a lot of people who believe that there's a hell, are motivated to behave better, because of that belief. But I think the salient point is that like, that's an extremely unnecessarily cruel belief that, we can motivate good behavior in ourselves and in others without having to resort to such a heinous threat that actually in the minds of many people who have left the church and religion, actually ends up, defining God as a really, really horrible, vindictive, cruel being.
Exactly.
All right, guys. Yep, we've got about 20 seconds left. So Chandler, thank you. Jamie, thank you. This has been a great episode.
You're welcome.
I think next episode, let's deal more with like this, like if we don't have a free will, what actually is controlling our thoughts? How do we explain reality? Okay, thanks for listening, everyone.